Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Hey guys, and welcome back to our Childcare Conversations. Today it's Kate and I, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about using your crystal ball,
I
right?
thought we were no. We're talking about financial forecasting.
Yeah, that's your crystal ball. You look into it. Or is it the magic 8 ball? I think not. Is that what it is? Is it the
I
magic
think
eight?
right now that's what it is. I'm thinking definitely some folks think that their crystal ball has definitely turned into the magic 8 ball. So, but with that, Carrie, why is this so important? We're talking about this in February. Does it really matter?
I mean, yeah, I think it does. So we're going to talk a little bit about doing it for your center specifically, and also like what are some trends that we're seeing and other, influencers or other experts in the field are seeing. The
Well,
reason we need to
can,
do
can,
it,
can we start with industry trends? Like, can we start there?
I was thinking we would start the other place, but yeah, sure, we can start with the industry trends. Okay. So the one that people are whinging on about a lot in Texas right now is public pre-K. That's happening in different states at different rates and in different ways. But there is this push to have state or federal more money going into paying for childcare, but they're mostly paying for children 3 to 5, right?
Okay, so but what happens to all those kids that are under the age of 3?
Well, what happened in New York City, which was one of the first places that public pre-K was rolled out, was that a whole lot of child care centers closed and there was no place for infants and toddlers and young threes to get care because so many programs closed down because they were using the higher profit margin preschool kids to subsidize the infants and toddlers. So you would think that since that was such a colossal catastrophe, that other places would have learned from that, but not all of them have. And this is the same, not just here in the US, but in Canada, in New Zealand, in Australia, in the UK, where there is a lot more funding for what they consider the more important part of early childhood, those school readiness years 3 to 5, and there's not as much funding for the creche or the nursery or infants and toddlers.
Okay, but I have a question.
Yeah.
As a working parent, I totally understand why parents go, "Oh, this is free."
Yeah.
But most parents don't work the same hours that those schools are open. So what does that mean for that family? So all of a sudden they've got to come up with care for summers. Somebody's got to pick their kid up at 2 or 3 o'clock. Like, how does all of that work for those families?
Sometimes it doesn't. And so we've gotten more people who are, quote, nannies, unquote, who are not actually nannies. They are babysitters. I have read so much gothic fiction in my life. I know what a nanny is supposed to look like. They're supposed to develop curriculum. They're working with 1 to 4 children. They're getting those kids ready for boarding school when they're somewhere between the ages of 8 and 12. So we're having a lot more people who are doing informal childcare. Somebody, the neighbor is taking their kid to school in the morning. And then that college student, that high school student is picking the kids up at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock and bringing them to their house and plopping them in front of a screen and things like that. So that's part of how that's getting picked up in places where the childcare owners have not been smart. Because what a lot of childcare owners are doing is they're going, okay, well, we can't have those pre-K kids anymore because the school district's taken them. I guess we're just going to have to repurpose those rooms into, dance studios or something. And they're not remembering that the public pre-K probably goes from like 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, how many hours is that? That's six. How many hours is that? That's 6 hours, right? So your program is probably open 12 or 13 hours, And so the school district is taking 6 of it. Why aren't you offering care the other 7 hours? Like, I don't understand what's going on with people's brains. Just charge part-time care rates for those kids and get the school district to drop them off in a bus. Or, if you have to, go buy a bus. But part-time, half-time rates should be 70% of your full-time rate. So if your full-time rate, I've been using $800 recently as my sort of generic price for childcare. So if it's $800 a month for full-time care for that preschool child, what is 70%? I don't know. Let's look. I'm going to have to do math.
600%.
What?
$600.
Okay, so $600, you charge $600 and you only have to staff for 6 hours instead of for 12. Can you make money charging $600 for that before and after school care and only having to staff for that 6 or 7 hours? I think you can probably make money doing that.
Yeah, I think that we can. Maybe that's what we should do the next Butts in the Seats workshop. We'll do it around wraparound care, because the other thing to think about is summer care. So
Christmas break and Easter break and spring break and Thanksgiving break and, I don't know, Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay, but here's the thing. If you have a rate for summer camp for school agers, that is not the same rate as summer care for a preschooler, because the ratios are different, right? Like, school age ratios in Texas are significantly different than the ratios for staff to children with your 3-year-olds. So please, please, please do not price your 3 and 4-year-olds summer care as you would your school age summer camp.
Yes. Your rising preschoolers are a different rate than your rising first graders. So rising preschoolers and rising kindergartners, so kids who at the end of summer program will be going into first grade and higher, are one rate, and going into pre-K or kinder are another rate. So in my head, those are the 2 rates for summer programs. But again, you do you, boo. You do you. What else? What are some other industry trends?
Well, I think one of the other things that we're seeing from an industry standpoint is that we're still recovering. I mean, we're getting into literally, Carrie, what, in the next month, we're looking at 5 years of COVID. And there are still programs who only want to do full-time care. And I'm sorry, if you have parents who need part-time care, then give them part-time care. I think we also, you and I heard one of the staff with Hinge Advisors actually talking about contracting hours. And this is what you did when you were actually starting in the field, wasn't it?
It's what I did when I was a home-based provider. Yeah, I did. What are the hours that you need care? And they could have a half an hour on either side of what they thought they needed. But if they were going to be there earlier than half an hour before their contracted time or staying half an hour after their contracted time, I charged them. And this is in the early 90s, guys. I was charging $10 an hour for extra hours in the early 90s. So if you're not charging at least $10 an hour for those, like, inflation has happened. I'm sure that that's like 25%. And I think that more centers should go to that. And yes, I will 100% admit it means a lot more back-end paperwork for the office, because you've got this person who's scheduled to come in at 7, and this person's scheduled to come in at 8, and this person's scheduled to come in at 9, and these people who are going to come in at 10.
But doesn't that mean that your staffing rates should also be flexible, and therefore you may not be spending as much money on staff?
Exactly. Like, that is the upside, is when you need to bring in the second person in that classroom, and how long you can have one person in that classroom. So I think it's a great way to reduce your staffing costs.
Absolutely. The other thing that I have heard recently that I was just shocked that more programs didn't do is, at the beginning of the day, the consolidated rooms, like the I'm sure that has a term. drop-off rooms. I actually had a conversation with a program just this week where that wasn't something they'd ever even contemplated. So, like, literally, they were starting their day at 6 a.m. with 4 staff. And so we did the math of taking them to 2 staff. And, in her mind, it wasn't that big of a deal, but all of a sudden it was 2 staff for almost 2 hours every day.
Times 22 days times 12 months. Again, I could get out my calculator. Maybe I should. Kate's going to get out hers. But it also helps you with staff wanting to have flexible schedules. If you have somebody who's like, look, I just need to have a reason to get out of the house every day because I'm a retiree, and that was great. And then my spouse also became a retiree, and both of us being in the house for 24 hours a day is too many hours. So I need to have 3 hours a day. I'm leaving. Yes, Kate.
Okay. So the answer is almost $8,000 per staff person. So I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like if I had an extra 16 grand just by implementing 1 2-hour in the morning change, that I could do something with it. I might even be able to pay myself. I might be able to give, maybe those openers, maybe, a shift differential of some sort or a bonus. That's the other thing. Let's start with that as maybe one of our final trends, Carrie. I mean, one of the things I'm seeing more and more, and it's common in other industries, right? Other industries have bonuses, have scorecards, have true accountability measures for our teacher or for their staff. And it is one of the many business trends that hasn't transitioned like it should have over into early childcare. So if we're going to be talking, staff want pay raises, talk to me a little bit about how we can make bonuses work or incentives work. Like, why does it always have to be that $1 an hour or that 50 cents an hour or whatever it is everybody thinks it should be?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is one of those things that I did decades ago. I had people who were like, oh, I don't want to be the opener. I don't want to be the closer. And I was like, okay, people don't want those shifts. I don't want them every day either. So I just made it so that every shift you work as an opener, you get X amount extra for the number of days that you opened. So if you opened 7 days, you got an extra $2 a day for those 7 days. So you got an extra $14. Okay, cool. Now you can go to McDonald's. And it wasn't tied to their overall paycheck, so that if somebody was like, look, I just can't open the next month, my teenager is not getting out of bed, I need somebody else to take the opening, somebody else can take that, and they get rewarded for working within the team to do this thing that for whatever reason is not popular on your staff right now. So the openers and closers, having that be you do it, it gets checked off, you get a bonus, and it can be $2 for the day. And that makes a huge difference if you're living on a 20-year-old's 20-year-old budget.
Well, the other thing that's really great about that, Carrie, is that you're not really giving that person a pay raise. So you're not tied to it, right? So, openers having an opening rate, and then all of a sudden, like you said, they switch shifts.
Then you'd have to demote them, cut their pay, and then they get all bent out of shape. But they're the one who asked to not open anymore. And it's a huge challenge where you can say, hey, right now you're being a mentor teacher to this new person who was hired. Every time I get a mentor sheet from you, you get an extra $50 on your paycheck. So the mentor sheet says, I did the mentoring. This is the feedback from my mentee. This is my feedback. This is the next steps. Every time I get one of those sheets, I give you $50. Then I'm not chasing people to actually do the mentoring that I want done for my new staff. They're doing it on their own. They have an intrinsic motivation. I mean, it's a little bit extrinsic, but I'm not chasing that monkey anymore. I have given that monkey to the staff person who said they were ready to step into this new role. The same could be true if you have staff who are like, oh, I want to be a trainer. Great. Every time you do a training, you get one of those, here's a bonus for doing the thing. So I think it's a great idea. And it's one of those things that my car dealership does it. If you only fix what is the standard in their shop of, I don't know, 12, I'm making up numbers, 12 cars a day that you do the work on, then you just get paid your base. But if you did 16 cars, you get bonuses for those extra 4 cars.
Well, I would like us to kind of wrap up with a couple of thoughts. I don't know about you,
We
but
haven't even, we can't wrap up. We haven't talked about the need for them to forecast at their center, Kate.
oh, okay. Well, I got one thing to say, and then they can forecast to their centers. Because then we have to do that pretty fast. One of the things that I really think is important when we're starting to look at incentives, and you and I have talked about this for like seriously, truly decades, is those referral bonuses, giving them, a reason to do the tour, to follow up with a phone call. Do you have somebody who really, really is passionate about your program? Give them that opportunity. So, I really think that, and it's been great hearing more and more industry leaders give that as an example of a way to fill your program. Because if your staff aren't already your raving fans and they're not already telling people about your program, you have to scratch your head a little and go, why? But if you give them that dollar incentive, it's
And she's
amazing.
not saying $1. Don't
No.
give them $2. She's saying financial incentive. Okay, so let's go back to what I thought we were starting with, which was why is it important to forecast what's going to happen financially at your center? A lot of people think, okay, this is something that we do in October or November before we do our annual budget. And that is a decent time to do it. But here we are in February, and you now know how many enrollments you got in the January enrollment bump. Okay, we're at reality here. And because you're having conversations, and if you're not, shame on you. Bad dog, no biscuit. You need to be having conversations with all of those parents whose kids are 2.5 and older about what they're planning to do for the next school year, and talk to them about all the wonderful things you have planned. Like, oh, are you going to be able to be one of the parents on the pumpkin patch field trip? I know you were looking forward to that. And, getting them a little bit of that fear of missing out, talking about how they will be impacted by the fall programs, but asking them, are they sticking or are they bouncing? And then you can forecast and go, okay, I got these 4 families that said they were going to be here, but they weren't looking me in the eye. So I think they might be looking. And then I've got these 8 other families who are definitely leaving for the new school year. So that means I need to enroll as if I have 12 openings. What am I going to do for my marketing to fill those 12 spots?
Hey, we're assuming that they're full to begin with, Carrie.
Of course, I'm assuming that. They've been listening to us. We've been talking to them for 2 years. And if they are doing what we tell them to do, they will be full. But if you haven't hired somebody to handle your marketing who's actually giving you, I don't know, results-based marketing, direct results marketing, then maybe they're not full. So what do they do if they're not full?
Well, first of all, there's 2 different levels of full, right? There's your licensed capacity
And your functional capacity.
There's your functional capacity, and you really need to kind of know the difference there. Is that functional capacity because your teachers complain? Is that functional capacity because I'm going to use a room like an infant room that might have a ratio of maximum group size of 8 and you're licensed for 10, right? So it doesn't make sense to bring in those other 2 kids because you can't even do that group size wise, right? So some of that is a little bit, kind of wonky, but either way, let's just say you have 100 kids that you should have in your program right now. And you're like, oh, we're doing really pretty good. We've got like 85.
No, that's bad.
That
That's
means
really
you
bad.
have 15 kids. And if you base that off of Carrie's $800 a kid,
Hang on, I'm doing it.
you're doing the math. That means that you are leaving a butt ton of money
12 grand. 12 grand a month.
every month. You have 12 grand left on the table. What could you do with an extra 12 grand in your program? Yes, it's 15 kids. Yes, it's, 15%, whatever. That is probably your profit margin. So if you are listening to this, even if you're a director and you're like, oh, that's not my deal, guess what? It is your deal. And if you have an owner who hasn't put you on an incentive program, you need to have a conversation with your owner. Okay. If you're an owner listening to this and you have a director who seems to leave money on the table all the time and they're not really good at following up or following through with tours and phone calls, give us a call. Let's coach you through how to design a real incentive program for them, because you don't have time for that stuff. Not when you're leaving 12 grand on the table every month. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Go ahead, Carrie.
And 12 grand times 12 months, like that's real money. Like that's a gross of thousands of dollars. Like that's $144,000 or pounds or yen or lira, depending on where you guys are listening.
It's probably at least 3 staff.
Yeah. Two at the minimum. Like you can hire a whole new administrator. You can hire a person who is just doing enrollments for that $144,000 and have extra money to put in the savings account, your bank account, the emergency fund, whatever. At $144,000, you can hire that position, or our recommendation, hire a company who does that. Get it the heck off your plate, but make sure that they are good at what they do and they're results based. And you still have more profit and have a better running school because there's one person or one agency taking care of the marketing for your program.
Customer service is, unless that's your thing. I mean, if you came into childcare from business and you were all into the customer experience and customer service and and you were in sales and this is what drives you, awesome. We actually have been talking about it since 2008 about how every program needed an enrollment specialist. And I will tell you, literally for decades, people look at us like, with their eyes crossed, like we're crazy, that childcare centers don't need salespeople. And I'm like, yeah, they do. Anyway.
You cannot do your job of providing excellent quality care for children if there are no children in the building. That is the basis of the business. Anyway, there was one other trend we didn't really get a chance to talk about, but you guys already know about it, which is a lot of large centers that are 150 to 300 kids going in across the country, across the world, really. Some of those are venture capital backed, because here's the thing that I want you to just think about. If venture capital thinks that childcare is an industry worth investing in, guess what? It's an industry worth investing in. And if you're not investing in your staff and your systems, then somebody else is investing in theirs and they're going to eat your lunch.
Absolutely. All right. So just to kind of wrap up, a couple of things that we talked about that were industry trends is public pre-K and their impact, flexible care, wraparound care, part-time care, as well as staff incentives and bonuses, followed by what you need to be doing in your own program. There's the financial forecasting, which really comes into enrollment forecasting, doesn't it, Carrie? When you're trying to figure out, that whole difference between what kids are staying, what kids are going, where am I right now? And if you take away nothing today, hopefully you will sit down and do the math at your program on how much you're losing every month or annually, if you really want to get yourself incentivized to fill those spots. Do the math, right? Because 12 grand may not, I mean, to me, it would make me go, oh, let's figure that out. But if 12 grand doesn't, maybe $144,000 will, because you only have 15 spots open.
And again, if your rates are higher than that, or you have more than 15 spots, you might be really, really surprised by how quickly that money becomes an issue. And again, we're talking your functional capacity. And another way, this is a bonus tip. Another way to increase your functional capacity, I'm giving stuff away here, I'm sorry, is to train your staff so that they are better at their job so that you can get closer to that license number and still provide quality care. Okay. Anyway, I think that is more than enough. This has been a little bit longer than a lot of ours. So if you enjoyed the show, share it with someone else who needs to know, maybe somebody else on your administrative team, and go into your podcast player of preference and write a review. We'd love to hear them. We read every one of them. And if we can figure out how to reply back, we do, but we can't always figure that out because we don't have somebody who that's their full-time job. And we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.